talk about El Salvador. Now, amidst everything that's been going on in the last 2 weeks, I found myself thinking probably about every other day, what's going on in El Salvador? And so I'm happy that today we get to talk about it. So El Salvador's National Assembly is considering a draft bill to regulate digital securities, which is an indication that the country will move forward with its plans to issue Bitcoin-backed bonds. You'll remember in March, the country put a pause on these Bitcoin-backed bonds. The bill was presented by the Minister of Economy, Maria Luisa Hayem Breve, and seeks to establish a National Digital Assets Commission to oversee the regulation of digital asset issuers and service providers. Wendy, I'm going to kick this one off to you first. What do you think about El Salvador moving ahead with these bonds?
I think that it is absolutely amazing, and I don't want to get into the way that he governs his country, but I really do want to focus on how El Salvador is using Bitcoin as a tool to essentially gain their power back. This is why Bitcoin was created. It was created for the people, by the people, and yes, even though President Bukele is this, I guess that he calls himself the CEO of El Salvador or whatever it is a joke. I think it is important to note that we're seeing a country that got a lot of slack globally essentially take their power back and tell people and tell a lot of these organizations, these big global organizations, we don't need you. We don't need your help. We don't want your help. We're fine on our own. And essentially they're taking their power back and they're creating their own monetary policy and they're creating their own laws and regulations for all of this stuff. So I think it's absolutely amazing. And it just goes to show that we're starting to see a shift in the way a lot of different countries portray themselves and how they're using Bitcoin to essentially help their people in a positive aspect. So again, 100% here for it. I root for the underdogs as always.
Yeah, I'll pick it up. I think this is an interesting story and one that we've been waiting for quite a while, right? Like people have been wanting this bond to proceed and it was delayed quite a bit. The last delay, the excuse for it was the war between Ukraine and Russia. And people were kind of scratching their heads being like, why does that have any bearing on a small nation in Latin America? Maybe they have their reasons. I don't know. I'm not a geopolitical expert, but there's definitely some questions around that. But now we're seeing it proceed, and hopefully it does actually happen. And I think this bond itself, like as a financial instrument, is probably the most important thing about the Bitcoin journey in El Salvador. Like the legal tender movement was big, of course, and it got some repercussions from the IMF. But it really just fell on people in El Salvador, right? And there's been some adoption there. There's some stories about that. But I think this bond actually shows that, hey, they want to raise funds using this new technology, and they don't want to go to the IMF to do this, right? So like the backstory here is developing countries are always going to these large westernized institutions for funding. They're going to the IMF, going to the World Bank, they're going to the UN. And every time you go get a check from them, well, there's strings attached. And those strings, they're onerous, and they often mean you have to change your entire market economy based on what these third bodies want. And Bukele, to his credit, said, no, we don't want to play by your games anymore or by your rules. We want to go our own separate way. And so they created this Bitcoin bond idea with like the purpose of raising funds for the country, because it does need funds, right? At the end of the day, they still need funds for infrastructure, for healthcare, for childcare, for those sort of things. But they're going to do it in a free market using Bitcoin as like the back end, the promissory part of this note. Hopefully it proceeds. I'd love to see it close. I think it could be a big deal. And I think it'd be like a nice instrumentation for other countries that are also looking for some sort of financial benefit, but without anything attached to the World Bank or the IMF. And frankly, a lot of the crony policies that they use. Jen, back over to you.
Yeah, Will, I think you and I on the show before had a little bit of back and forth as to like what's going to happen to El Salvador in the bear market. And I think we're seeing exactly what is going to happen to El Salvador in the bear market. They're continuing to push on. I believe that President Bukele recently said that the country is going to start buying a Bitcoin a day. We have no information on if that has come to fruition, if they are actually buying a Bitcoin a day. And I wonder if we're going to see more countries follow in El Salvador's footsteps. We pondered that a lot when this news was announced during the bull market. And now that we're in the bear market, I think that maybe some other countries who traditionally rely on solutions that the World Bank and the IMF provide with those caveats could be looking to Bitcoin and could be looking to El Salvador as a use case. I do want to talk about this Bitcoin fund management agency that will be put into place if these new rules are passed into law. They'll be responsible for administering, safeguarding, and investing funds from public offerings of digital assets carried out by the state of El Salvador and its autonomous institutions. I thought that autonomous institutions language was really interesting. It may be pointing to El Salvador looking at some kind of DAO to govern this these newfound assets. I don't know that, but I thought that was interesting language. Wendy?
I wonder, okay, so if they do, in fact, you do a DAO, decide to do a DAO, is it going to be a Bitcoin DAO or is it going to be some sort of Ethereum-based DAO? What chain do you think that they're going to use?
Can you do a Bitcoin-based DAO?
I don't know.
I don't know, but if they decide to use a separate chain from Bitcoin, a lot of the Bitcoin maximalists, I think, would be up in arms about it for a DAO. But I think a DAO is a great idea. But at the same time, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see, like we do so often on this show.